Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Roto NBA Daily Fantasy Podcast / video show. I am Davis Maddock, joined by Christopher Pacheco. I am here for my last show of the year. Pacheco is going to have another show tomorrow with Mr. Barron. We got ourselves a nice and easy 9-game slate. Now, of course, we are coming to you before the 4:30 injury report, so I would imagine some things are probably going to change before we get there. Pacheco, I believe I saw some chatter. The Atlanta Hawks might be one of the teams doing the mass rest thing tonight. Are we looking at any team on this 9-game slate? Obviously, 18 teams. Do we think any of these teams are going to pull a Milwaukee Bucks, hockey shift on us where they're resting the starters?
Well, or I was going to say Orlando's kind of already doing that, but
correct, yeah.
They've been doing that for forever, and they just have a bunch of dudes out. I think that Atlanta and San Antonio are probably those teams tonight. Atlanta, because their injury report is pretty full with Bogdan, Clint, Capella, and Danilo Gallinari. They're all queued tonight. Trey is on the injury report as well, but he's probable, so would expect him to play. And they're just playing the Magic, and they just played last night, and yep. So that's a situation where they certainly could do that. And then the San Antonio, they just played yesterday as well, and are pretty live to just be the 10th seed at this point, so they could pull resting DeJounte, DeMar DeRozan type of thing on us out of the blue.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will keep that in mind as we go through these games. So I guess let's start with the first game on the docket. The Milwaukee Bucks playing at the yes, these are the Pacers, but they're not the real Pacers, right? We don't have Malcolm Brogdon playing. The Pacers rotation is, I guess, it's about as full as it's been for a while. They just have basically inserted O'Shea Brissett into their lineup. He is just playing Miles Turner's minutes, more or less. They have both of the Holiday brothers back. Jakar Sampson is back and active. We have a pretty favorable projection on Sabonis, and then obviously with no Brogdon, LeVert does have loads of upside, right? I mean, he is handling so much of the ball, but so does Sabonis. Sabonis has had some of these absurd games over the last couple weeks of the season. So I do think LeVert and Sabonis do both look like pretty strong plays.
Yeah, the rates on both of them have been so favorable for a good stretch here without Malcolm Brogdon. Thing is, LeVert is questionable with a knee now, and Indiana's another one of those teams that there's really nothing to play for at this point. Like, they're pretty much locked into the plan, and so they certainly could rest LeVert and make this a little bit nightmarish for us. But without Brogdon, potentially Aaron Holiday, who's questionable as well. We should see Justin Holiday. He started last game. He'll probably start in this one. It's just he doesn't do a whole lot for fantasy, but he could get 30-plus minutes in this one if Aaron Holiday specifically misses. If Holiday and LeVert miss, you're going to get 30-plus minutes out of Justin Holiday. I'm pretty darn confident in that one, maybe even mid-30s, frankly. And you'll probably see Kelan Martin also play a good bit in this one as well. But really, you nailed it at the top. It's Sabonis, it's LeVert. McConnell could certainly stand to benefit in the event that Holiday and LeVert also miss. So that's another name that I'm keeping an eye on.
Okay, yeah, we got a question here from the chat. James is asking, are we assuming a lot of the studs, Jokic, Giannis, guys like that, assume that they play, but, 30, 31, 32 minutes as opposed to 35, 36, 37?
I think, yeah. So with Jokic and Giannis specifically, I think they're getting managed a little bit. So 36, 37, those minutes are probably just out of range altogether. It's more like in the low 30s. I mean, I have Jokic at 33. I might be the lowest in the whole industry, but at the same time, he just played like 33 in a competitive game the other night. And Denver, outside of playing for seeding at this point, which would be, what is it on the? Let me look this up. It's either they're going to finish fourth or third in the West. So there's no other movement.
And we were talking
them
the other day about how they'd actually prefer to finish fourth because that means that they avoid both the Lakers and the Clippers and the Lakers either way, right? Yep. So they would I think they would prefer to stay fourth. So let's go over to the Milwaukee side of the game. Yep. They are completely healthy. The Death Star is quite operational. No Qs, no Ds, no red tags. For the Milwaukee Bucks. So we have quite non-favorable median projections for Drew, Middleton, and DiVincenzo. I would say Drew and Middleton, if I was playing 150, and I'm not because I don't. God bless you guys who are still playing 150 on May 13th. I mean, truly, God bless you. Those guys seem like just because they could run hot with shooting or whatever in the minutes, or Giannis plays 28 minutes. They decide, look, let Drew play 34 minutes. Let's rest Giannis. Let's take it easy on Giannis. A little bit more usage for Drew, a little bit more usage for Middleton. They are both guys that have a good leverage indicator on the site. But I'm not that into Giannis tonight. I feel like Jokic is the better pure spend. And I prefer. I think I actually prefer Sabonis and Randall at power forward / center as well, given what you have to spend for them.
Yep, I understand. I get where you're coming from. I just still don't think that you can dismiss Giannis completely on the slate. I completely agree with you on Jokic. Like he's obviously such a strong play. Even at 33 minutes, he's projected for nearly 60 fantasy points. If he were to play just a couple more than that, it'd be projecting like Westbrook or something like that. So certainly understand why he's at the very top. Sabonis, you could argue, is even safer than Giannis. But the thing is, you don't have to battle it out with other high end studs on this slate. It's a 9-gamer. Lots of games out there, but you don't have Westbrook. You don't have Curry. I think there's a path for Giannis to still be a tournament winner at this like 32 to 33,
59 points or whatever. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah,
like there's a path. Whereas in some of these slates with Westbrook and stuff, it's just harder to envision that path. So I don't want to dismiss him entirely on the slate, even if he gets managed a little bit like what we've seen of late. Do agree with you on Drew and Middleton. With good leverage scores, I think they are in play in mass multi-entry, but that's about where you tap out with those two at this point.
Yeah. All right. The Los Angeles Clippers playing at the Charlotte Hornets. We have we talked about this when I did the show with you on Tuesday. It's just tough with the Clippers when they are fully healthy because they have so many different guys. I mean, they have 6 guys who are gonna run a pick and roll in this game, right? We got Kawhi, we got Paul George, we got Batum, we got Reggie Jackson, we got Rondo, we got Beverly, even Man chipping in here. I mean, obviously we are a little interested in Kawhi and Paul George, but I don't think either one of them would make a single entry or 3 max mix. Like I don't think either one of, and certainly not cash games either. Like it's just they both have individual upside, but they both they cannibalize each other's possessions so much.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think the one cash play from George and Kawhi might be George on FanDuel because of the $7,800 price tag. He's still kind of popping as a reasonable play, and I think for cash games like that works. In tournaments, it's where I won like the big ceiling, and yes, you're right. These guys do cannibalize each other. And so it's a little bit tougher to see it, but the price tags are largely good on these guys. So in 150 set, yeah, you still want some exposure there. I don't think they're going to be owned much on the slate regardless. Beyond that, on the Clippers, they're too full. Morris does have a $4,600 price tag on FanDuel at power forward. That's semi-interesting, but I just don't want to do anyone else here. It's the top two, maybe more is on FanDuel, and that's it.
Yeah. The other side of the ball, the Charlotte Hornets. I mean, they just with the return of LaMelo Ball and Devonta Graham it's just killed all their rates, Pacheco, because they're also still playing Malik Monk, a reasonable amount of minutes per game, about 20 minutes a game off the bench. So you have LaMelo, Rozier, Graham, Monk, all as ball handlers for portions of the game, and even with Gordon Hayward and Bridges out of the game, you would think maybe McDaniels would be a little bit playable, but he is just all the way juiced up. They're on DraftKings, they're just charging you absolute full price for him. And then they are also maintaining, that gross center rotation of playing three different guys at center. So it's just the Hornets. I mean, can you make a case for any of these guys in tournaments? I guess maybe LaMelo, maybe Rozier, but outside of that, it doesn't look great.
Yeah, and I wish we had a little bit better of a price tag on PJ Washington, because he's been playing lots of minutes, regardless of what they do with Biyombo and Zeller. But he's like priced really, really fully, so that's a challenge. I still think LaMelo's a buy. I don't think there's much minutes upside than what we've been projecting here on site, 31, 32. That's about where he's been living at lately. But 8,500 on DraftKings, it's just people are going to be looking at the same thing you and everyone is looking at, right? You're going to look at the game logs and it's like, he's not really even topping 40 most of these games. But the upside is still pretty significant. His shooting has been pretty poor on some of these games, and that has absolutely ruined some of his fantasy value. But I still think the upside is there. And again, a 9-gamer where there are some studs that are getting not full minutes at this point of the season makes someone like LaMelo, in my opinion, a buy. Maybe Rozier, as you mentioned, but I think I'm mostly interested on LaMelo.
Yeah, and I mean, we have a 2.8% projected ownership for LaMelo. So you could go 10% on him and be 4 or 5x the field. So LaMelo, I think probably would be a guy you could bump tonight. All right, let's move to the potential rest game. Why don't you break down the Orlando rotation first? Because I know we have some questionables sitting here. Mo Bamba didn't play the other night. Then Wendell was a great play, and then Wendell wasn't playing the other night, so Bamba's up in the 7,000s. Hilarious thing the other night, Cole Anthony plays 32 minutes, records 0 assists. I mean, the Magic, dude. How bad are the Orlando Magic? So why don't we break down the Orlando side and then go over the potential rest scenarios for the Hawks?
Yeah, well, frankly, I hate to do this on any slate, but I do think Orlando is essentially just priced completely out on DraftKings. You just can't,
because of the way the injuries have worked, everyone is priced up like other guys are out in the rotation. So when everyone's in and they're all playing 28 minutes, they're all terrible priced.
Yeah, it's also not the situation that where we have like 7 players available, right? Like we still have enough horrible Magic players. The minutes are, they're giving Sindarius Thornwell legit rotational minutes. I mean, it's not a good situation to attack for DFS. It's really bad. So I think the one guy that maybe it's a little bit of a hopeful one, but if Bamba's out, I think Wendell Carter Jr. you might be able to do really on both sites. But outside of that, it's thin. I know Cole Anthony has a good tag on FanDuel at 5K. Blowout risk and the rotational risk that we've seen of late, it's really, really tough to consider anyone from there.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. All right, so let's go over Atlanta. So right now, on Atlanta, if you go look in the projections, you'd be like, why are you guys talking about Atlanta? We got Trae Young, Clint Capella, Bogdanovich, Collins, Herter, Gallo, all projected in. However, we are thinking potentially this could be a Capella rest spot, a Collins rest spot, et cetera, so on and so forth. So why don't you break down some of the ways we could go here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with Capella specifically, questionable. If he doesn't play and they just don't do John Collins at center, I think they're just going to do Okongwu at center, and he should be minimum priced on both sites. So that one right off the bat, a center that's going to project for low 20s fantasy points is going to be attractive, I think, for a lot of DFS owners. So that one you definitely should keep an eye on for value. We could even get some Lou Williams. I know he had started in some spots at shooting guard when Bogdanovich was out. But they also don't have Tony Snell, so they can't go there either. And they're going to do a lot of Kevin Huerter in that scenario that Bogdanovich doesn't play. So I think Huerter, especially on FanDuel, 4,300, that it's a good tag. Even 4,700 on DraftKings, I think he'll pop. I think he'll pop a good bit. And then Lou Williams, because he's really cheap on both sides. I mean, just any sort of minutes in the 20s, I think that guy might just be quite interesting on this slate. So I think those are the names that you should be keeping an eye on. I don't think Brandon Goodwin is going to emerge here because unless Trey doesn't play and that probable tag gets changed to questionable, he's not a shooting guard. So I just don't see a path for him.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a question. If the Hawks do the rest, but they also play Trey, are we worried about Trey's minutes? Like, would we be worried that he plays like, he's going out there, he's getting his cardio in, but he plays 29 minutes? Like, would we be a little bit worried about that, or would we just assume full go?
I think you have to have some level of concern there because of the fact that they're facing Orlando. But the fact that Trey is probable, keep in mind the Hawks are in fourth place right now, which is that sweet spot in the East that we've been talking about a lot on the show. 4 or 5 is where you really want to be. So they have an incentive to go out there and still play Trey at least somewhat regular minutes against this Orlando team. It's just a matter of if the game can stay close or not. If it can stay close, I still think 34 to 36 is a reasonable expectation for Trey.
Yeah, that works for me. I would say I would be pretty interested in Trey in a Collins Capella rest. I mean, Capella is whatever. He uses very few possessions, but Collins uses a ton. Also, Bogdan, right? Yeah, Bogdan rest. Then we're really interested in Trey, especially because whoever replaces him, Solomon Hill, whoever, very low usage player. All right, San Antonio at New York. Very cheap Dejounte Murray, priced down to $7,000 on DraftKings, looking pretty good. I would also say DeMar, very interesting tournament option here, because the Spurs have incentive, right? They still need to win. They can't lay down. Is that correct?
Well, as of right now, they're 2 ahead of the Kings.
Okay.
So it looks like a wrap up. I mean, the Kings, I think, would essentially have to win out and get a little bit of help here from the Spurs. Like the Spurs would have to lose a couple of these games. This is tonight is a game where they certainly could lose, traveling to New York, second night of a back-to-back. It's certainly not a good context for them, but they still want to clinch it.
And the Knicks have incentive here too.
They do.
So yeah, to continue to be ahead of the Heat. So this should be. That's kind of interesting. I mean, this should be a competitive game. We should see full minutes from the starters for both teams here, I think. I guess maybe the Spurs are not they don't want to lose probably, but at the end, they probably don't care. Got a question here, skipping ahead. Do we think that this DeAndre Ayton Q is a legit Q, or do we think it's just we're in May and guys are banged up and we're listing guys at Q?
No, I certainly think it's a legit Q. I mean, Phoenix has a little bit to play for. I'm assuming they'd like to get to that first seed. That way you secure home court advantage for the whole playoffs. But guys are very banged up. Guys are really tired at this point of the season. I mean, that Lakers-Knicks game the other night was just an absolute bloodbath. These guys, it just feels like they're barely running out there. So definitely shaky legs. But I do think that the Aiden thing is legit. Yeah.
All right. There. Yeah. Pretty interesting. Okay. On the Knicks side of the ball, I did for sure want to point out that Randall looks like an absolute smash. I mean, defended by Jakob Poeltl and Keldon Johnson and, these trees for the San. Like, there's no one in the Spurs front court who can do anything against him. And we know there are no minutes limitations or restrictions for the New York Knickerbockers. Tom Thibodeau does not care. You can chalk up 36 minutes tonight for Julius Randle. I think he looks like a fantastic spend. I would expect him to be a cash game option. Rose looks a little overpriced to me at 6,400. I can see a case for playing RJ Barrett in tournaments though.
Yeah, I think Randall is certainly the best Nick in terms of a fantasy asset and also real life player. I mean, that's their star. That's the best guy they got. He might even get some MVP votes. He's been great this year. Just absolutely awesome. But I think when you look at the rest of the Knicks, that's the challenge here. It's just not much else. You mentioned RJ Barrett, but Alec Burks is going to be probable and likely plays in this one. You just need you need Barrett at this point to make some shots and force Thibodeau.
He's got to score 30 real points to end up in the optimal for sure.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. His efficiency is just not. It's not what you want it to be. The minutes should be there. They should be in a friendly range. I don't hate the price tag. I don't like the upside. I certainly would rather Randall, but that's what everyone's thinking. I also think Nerlens is like a little interesting in MME sets.
He plays so much. Nerlens minute totals are generally around 25 to 32, kind of depending. And he's just got to run hot with the stocks, right? He's got to get 4 blocks and 2 steals and 12 and 8 or whatever. And if he does that, he's got what's his price on FanDuel? Because obviously on Stock Duel, center is just so important on FanDuel, and you can only play one.
And that's why, you have to eliminate him from everything else in terms of tournaments. But an MME, like he's 4,300 on FanDuel, and obviously, as you mentioned, that's Stocks Duel. But he does have it's quite loaded in terms of center. So it's certainly a challenge, and he will need to run good on stocks. The only worry really in this game, Davis, is if the Spurs prioritize rest over the win or the potential for the win. And I think if you see rest, it's not just going to be one of the guys. It might be, both DeJounte and DeRozan out in that scenario, which obviously would change a lot of the rotation in San Antonio.
Yeah. All right. Philadelphia at Miami. Okay. This is my conspiracy theory for this slate, Pacheco. So the other night, Embiid got rested and Simmons and Harris played. I think this line is fishy to me. It's a pick-em line. The 76ers are a game and a half up on the Nets. Yeah. I think there is a non-zero chance that one of Harris or Simmons rest tonight because they rested Embiid the other night, and Simmons and Harris played. So I think there is a chance one of these guys ends up sitting. Or maybe both of them and Embiid plays.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. We've seen Doc do so many things. Even they're not listed on the injury report.
Yeah, but totally we'll random though. Yeah,
it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. But frankly, I think the most likely scenario is just that we don't see Embiid. He's showing up as I've been tracking these injury report things where they say NA and then they say non-COVID illness. And NA typically means that they just weren't available for shoot around or something like that, which is already, it's kind of pushing the player closer to doubtful in my head. I'm not projecting that, but it's pushing it that way for me. So I think the likeliest scenario here in terms of of a guy out is probably just Embiid, which of course would change the rest of the value for the Sixers because we know Ben Simmons in that scenario becomes a more fantasy friendly, and the same thing for Tobias Harris because his usage rate skyrockets to the high 20s.
Yeah. All right. Miami side of the ball. So this is my thing. Obviously, Jimmy, revenge, playing great right now.
Yeah.
all the usage rate on offense, all these things.
Yep.
The 76ers are so good on defense. Embiid is the best post defender in the NBA. Ben Simmons is either the best or second best perimeter defender in the NBA, depending on how you define Giannis, I guess. I mean, they're just such a tough matchup for guys exactly like Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy is projecting as chalk right now. We have him projected as 13% on DraftKings. And I know the projection looks good. I am not super interested in him at, 15% in the lottos, 25% in single entry. I would prefer, for example, I think probably to play Tobias instead.
Especially if no Embiid, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think people would agree with you on that one in terms of if Embiid is out and Tobias has that good tag. I think you'll see people flock to that for sure. All the things that you mentioned on Jimmy are legit in terms of the matchup concerns, but I have a good counter for you. Miami definitely has to
win.
They gotta have to win some of these games here, because the Knicks are in a very winnable spot tonight against the Spurs, and then the Heat, technically speaking, are in the worst matchup, because if Embiid plays and all the dudes are in for Philadelphia, they might be home dogs in this spot. They probably will if Embiid plays. So it is tough, but you're going to see as long as Jimmy is out there and can play. I saw that he was expected to play. He didn't return the other night with an eye contusion, but he's going to play in this one. That dude's a warrior. You can see 36 to 38 minutes out of him, and that's why, Davis, you're seeing this good projection on him. If you toggle the minutes down,
he's playing 40 minutes if he needs to. No doubt about it.
And that, I think that's what's really elevating his projection beyond the level that you typically see. Because if you just simply toggle down his projection to 34, 33, 34 minutes, it's going to start to be in the 43, 44 fantasy point range. Right now, it's like nearly 47. And that's because we're projecting nearly 36 minutes there. So I get you on the matchup. It's just that the minutes and from what we've seen on Jimmy, the rates are still pretty awesome with all the dudes in Miami in there.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? I mean, do you like Bam? Do you like Dragic? Do you like Hero? I mean, anyone else from this game?
For me, Bam certainly becomes way more playable if Jimmy can't give it a go. With Jimmy in there, think of Bam as a cash play. It just he falls into like nice range of outcomes, but it's not for tournaments. Typically he's not going to do like 55, 60 or something with Jimmy in there.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one. Big game to discuss here because of the Sacramento Kings front court rotation. They are likely is Bagley out or doubtful here?
Bagley last I checked was doubtful.
Okay. All right. So their front court rotation has become Holmes and Chimezie Metu starting at center and power forward. Their direct backup is Mo Harkless and this fella by the name of Justin James. Terrence Davis playing some minutes on the wing. Really, the Kings, Wright, Buddy, Holmes, Davis. I think all of their starters are playable in single entry and 3 max. I do. I think Terrence Davis is a little thin now that he's at 5,900. But the rest, I mean, even DeLon Wright at 8K, honestly, I think all these guys are playable.
Yeah, I don't know how the rest of the DFS industry is handling the minutes on the Kings. I have a suspicion that because their minutes haven't been great of late, people are just kind of toggling them down would be my best guess, but they've also been a part of blowouts and technically speaking haven't been eliminated from the play-in conversation, excuse me. So do they need help from San Antonio? Yeah. Do they have to win this game tonight? Yeah, they kind of do.
Who cares?
They're at that point, right? But here's the thing. With that in mind, they could play 38 to 40 minutes. DeLon, Buddy could certainly do that. And I think that range puts them in play on the slate. The price tags, as you mentioned, aren't great. That's a reason why people are probably going to ignore this spot. in such a big slate. So I do like Buddy. I do like DeLon for tournaments. I think Rashawn on FanDuel looks pretty darn good at 6,100, but center is loaded, so it's tougher to play him in tournaments when that's the case. But I think you can give him a try. Metu is. I'm going to take a second look at his usage rate because there's some scaling going on there with all the dudes out in Sacramento. And Metu's one of the guys that's benefiting and projecting in the, what is it, 20, yeah, almost a 23% usage rate for him. That really should be closer to like 17, 18 with him starting. It's just really difficult to do that because Sacramento has so many dudes out. He's a fine play. He's probably going to be chalky though, given the price tag.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand that on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, Davis, he's center eligible. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, he's center eligible on FanDuel. It's still $4,200 price tag. Like the per dollar value there is pretty nice, even when I adjust his usage rate some. But you have to understand the ceiling on some of these guys is pretty thin. And Metu strikes me as that type of play. So it's like Zubats. Like it's a fine little cash play, but in tournaments you really need a ceiling at center to separate yourself from the competition.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can see a great argument for fading him on FanDuel at center. His optimal percentage, his optimal percentage on DK is 12% right now in our stuff. I mean, intuitively, that feels a little low to me, but clearly he is the worst leverage play of the slate. Like how much he is owned versus how many lineups he's going to be in. I guess if you wanted to get leverage on him, whether it be foul trouble or just playing bad and getting replaced, it would be Harkless. Harkless would be the 1-for-1. And then if Metu's just not getting any stats, it would probably be because Rashawn Holmes plays 33 minutes and is just crushing all the boards.
Yeah, and in that scenario, then Damian Jones probably didn't play much because he's the backup center directly to Rashawn. But with the Kings, essentially, their playoff lives are on the line, so they can't lose. So that scenario of Rashawn at 33 to 34 minutes, I really do believe is pretty darn live tonight.
Yeah. All right. On the other side, with Memphis, doesn't look like they have any big injuries here. Joe Val back in the lineup for them. Kyle Anderson, Jaren Jackson's back. Basically, Memphis is they're close to about as healthy as they have been all season. The Western Conference standings, they are at the 9 seed right now. It would be impossible for them to get to the 6, and I guess they theoretically could get to the 8.
Yeah,
I don't know if they care that much. Whatever.
I kind of think that they. Listen, man. I kind of think they do. I think they want to stay 9th. Aren't they going to play San Antonio?
Right. No, exactly. So that's a good point because I believe the way it breaks out is
it's the Lakers and the Warriors, right? If it's 8 and 7,
it's the Lakers and the Warriors, and it's the Mavericks and the Grizzlies. I think, right? Or
it's 9 and 10.
Grizzlies and the Spurs. Yeah.
Yeah. And in that scenario, I think they want to stay. You want to stay put here because you play the Lakers full health, which is it's looking like that will be the case in the play-in, and you are done. They lost that game, so I do think they want to stay in this 9 spot. I think it certainly benefits them, but I believe the way this is shaking out is they're playing a game against the Warriors on Sunday, so we will probably find out who is in that spot on Sunday, as long as one of these teams doesn't go in a little bit of a losing streak here. You mentioned Joe Val being Q. He's really their only big one, and I would think that Xavier Tillman would be back in the rotation in the event that Joe Val can give it a go. I certainly think that would be good for JJJ and his rebounding rate if Joe Val's not out there, because Joe Val's rebounding rate is pretty high. So that's something to consider. But I mean, yeah, Memphis, if Joe Val plays, it's pretty full. This is also, it's not that it's a bad matchup for Joe Val, it's a bad position on a 9-game slate for him. It's always tougher for him to get to be optimal when you have to compete against potentially Embiid, Jokic, cheaper centers. It's not a great spot from that perspective. It's a good matchup for Ja. It's a good matchup for a lot of these guys, including Jaren Jackson Jr., who is 5,900 on DraftKings. Hasn't shown a huge minutes limit. Doesn't matter. He could do 6 stocks tonight, and that pays off really well, especially over on FanDuel. So I am still very interested in that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Anything else from this game before we move to Toronto and Chicago?
Nope, you can move us on.
All right, so Toronto, they're not playing anyone, right? They got FVV out. They got Kyle Lowry out. They are not playing Pascal Siakam. Now, is Boucher doubtful or out? Because he played the other night, right?
Yeah, he's out, man. He's out. Okay. So that was the scenario that we were discussing on the show before that would give them 8 guys if he was out, and that's what they have tonight. They got 8 guys.
So these are their 8 guys. For their guards / wings, we got Gary Trent Jr., Malachi Flynn, Jalen Harris, and DeAndre Bembry. Then you can add Stanley Johnson to that. Front court guys, they got Utah, Kem Birch, and Freddie Gillespie. I guess everyone from Toronto is a play, probably, given their projected ownership. So Trent and Flynn are going to be popular. Birch has the minutes, but is not going to be popular. Mm-hmm. Then Harris, Watanabe have the price and the ownership. Gillespie, 3,600. I guess if you wanted to be very tricky and you were just a total leverage hardo and all you cared about was game theory, you would play Stanley Johnson and DeAndre Bembry because they're in the same position as Jalen Harris and Watanabe. Bembry actually does stuff too, by the way. Stanley Johnson is a do-nothinger, but Bembry actually does stuff when he's in, and we have him for 8.5% projected ownership.
Yeah, it's so tough. This situation is so tough. It's certainly one of the toughest I've had to deal with all season because, yeah, sure, it's only 8 guys, so like projecting the minutes in that scenario is not that difficult. I mean, it almost writes itself, right? The challenge is the names that we're talking about. We don't even have one of the studs in Toronto playing. Like just one of them.
I mean, we just have no idea what the offense is going to be like.
Well, I can tell you, I'm pretty confident that Gary Trent Jr. is going to take a bunch of shots.
He's going to take 21 shots, yeah.
He'll take a bunch of shots. It'll probably be bad shots. He'll take shots, a bunch of them. I think Malachi Flynn is definitely going to have an opportunity to have the ball in his hands a lot in this game. From what we've seen from Gary Trent Jr. lately, it's not great. From what we've seen for Flynn for a while, it is even worse. I mean, Flynn at these price tags, I frankly think he's pretty fadeable. He's almost 6K on DraftKings. Like, yeah, I get it. He could play 34, 35 minutes. It's been pretty empty calories here lately. So this is in Chicago as a matchup is also it's not like I'd be fading it, but with no one projecting as a good offensive player on Toronto, I mean, there's an out here where they don't even score 95 points. Like that's a potential scenario here for Toronto. So that's concerning. The biggest thing I could say is I would be limiting the amount of these dudes that are getting into my lineups. Do you really want to play Watanabe and Stanley Johnson and Freddie Gillespie in a lineup? Like, no.
Yeah, not together. You need to make rules with those guys for sure.
Like, you just need to be careful with that. And also understand a lot of these dudes that we're talking about, Watanabe, Gillespie, Stanley Johnson, Bembry, they fall in a pretty similar projection bucket. So there shouldn't be much ownership discrepancy there because they all pretty much are the same guys in terms of a projection. It's just that there's like little price tag differences here and there that are probably pushing that ownership. For example, Watanabe on FanDuel, he's minimum priced. To my point there. David, it's a tough one. I think Trent and Flynn are going to be busy. Birch, this situation doesn't change anything for him. He's not an offensive player. And he's going to have to deal with Vooch. Jalen Harris, I think, is interesting. Probably one of the more interesting ones. That is not Watanabe and the other dudes that I mentioned that are in the same projection bucket. Jalen Harris does stuff. He's a guard. He will probably have a pretty competitive usage rate to Trent and Flynn, and he's cheap. So I think that one stood out to me as a kind of a nice value. But I'm assuming he'll be owned. All these guys are going to be owned outside of Birch.
Yeah, no, which is a good point. Which I guess that would be a reason to play a little bit of Birch. I guess in terms of rules, so your rules would be, I think probably one of Utah, Johnson, and Bembry. Maybe you can make a case for two. I think max one of those guys. And then I think max one of Birch and Gillespie, because those guys are directly related. And then probably max, I would say max two of Trent, Flynn, Jalen Harris. What do you think about those rules?
I think that's good. I think those are good. I guess technically speaking, there's a path for Trent Flynn and Jalen Harris to all get there. Given that there's only 8 guys available, but I would like to make that rule in a 9-gamer. I think that's a really good one.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the Chicago side of the game. I suppose are they dead or are they drawing live here?
I mean, they are 2.5 away from Washington. They have to win out, get some help from Washington. It's looking really, really bleak. This is a win for them tonight, right? They're going to win this one. So that's great. And Washington has dropped a couple here of late without Beal to Atlanta. They haven't clinched yet, this 10th spot. So it's still there, but I think it's looking bleak. But with that said, I think Vooch, Levine, Kobe White, guys have been getting a lot of run here lately. Probably do so again as they try to keep their playoff, their slim play-in game alive.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question for asking that is this the backs against the wall game where Levine and Vooch play, super full minutes, and we see none of Lauri Markkanen and Satoransky, and it's basically like an 8-man rotation because, as we mentioned, it's a slate that's a little bit hard to pick the studs because not a ton of them are in must-win situations. Where I guess probably the Bulls are viewing this as a must-win game.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to. One more loss and they're definitely done. I mean, essentially one more win from Washington, and they're done too. It's just that Washington doesn't have Beal right now, so there is still a little glimmer of hope there. Vooch on DraftKings, I just hate the price tag there. I really wouldn't do it. He has a lot of competition at center tonight, but I think 9,700 on FanDuel, he could do it, especially if he's playing 38 minutes or something like that. I think that's quite interesting to me. Same thing with Levine. He's 8,600 on FanDuel, so even better of a tag. That one to me is a little bit attractive relative to the optimal percentage and the ownership that I'm seeing on him. It looks like it's going to be under 10%.
Yeah, I think that Vooch and Levine both look like quite good spends here. Yeah, I'm with you. In fact, I think also because shooting guard always sucks, which is why we see guys like Gary Trent Jr. and Jalen Harris get super ownership because shooting guard's always brutal. Like when Harden doesn't play, obviously, it's just like what do you do with shooting guard? So I think Levine looks pretty good, and I would guess that our ownership projection for Vooch on FanDuel is even lower, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's going to be like 3 to 5% in that range. Like I think as a good comp, Levine and Paul George are in a very similar projection bucket. Who would you rather for upside? Who would you rather do for upside?
Levine for sure, because Levine could go, 23 field goal attempts, 38 minutes. Yeah, no doubt about it.
And George, it's not that he's not a great player. It's just that he has Kawhi by his side and doesn't have to play for the things that the Bulls have to play for.
Right. All right. Next game, we have Minnesota and Denver. Interesting spot here for Denver because they are resting Michael Porter Jr., and then Monty Morris is not playing due to injury management. So that really tightens up their rotation unless, they want to play Zeke Naji and Bull. And, I guess they're going to throw Marcus Howard out there. Why do I know that guy's name? He must have been a decent college basketball player or something for me to remember his name. Shaq Harrison, probably going to get some run tonight. I mean, the guy Austin Rivers and JaMychal Green, they're going to get. I mean, JaMychal Green is literally going to play as many minutes as he can stand tonight, I think.
And here's the thing with some of these guys, really, really cheap and accessible around the industry. Aaron Gordon is $3,900 on FanDuel. $3,900, and you eliminate Michael Porter and his 37 to 39 minutes he's been playing every night. And all of a sudden, even someone like Aaron Gordon stands to benefit and is a little bit interesting. You have JaMychal Green at 3,700 on FanDuel, Davis. Paul Millsap, 3,700 on FanDuel as well. It's some really, really cheap tags here. Obviously, would I do JaMychal Green and Paul Millsap in the same lineup? No. You shouldn't do that. They're going to overlap. Same thing with someone like Campazzo and Austin Rivers. I don't want those dudes in the same lineup, obviously. So, make sure that you're kind of making the smart rules here. But with Jokic, it doesn't matter. You can do Jokic with essentially anybody. He is going to have a monstrous usage rate tonight.
But I was thinking Jokic looked like slam dunk, play him 80% or whatever. I am worried that if this game gets away from them in either direction, whether up 13 or down 13, Jokic is going to go to the bench and drink some Gatorade. I mean, there just is no reason. If Michael Porter Jr. is going to get rest, there's no reason for Jokic to be. I guess maybe is he chasing any records or anything? Well, I don't know enough to look.
Well, he hasn't missed a game.
All season, so they wanted to play all 72 games,
and he's going to be the MVP. It looks good, and he's not, to my knowledge, he's not banged up either. So he's not going to get rested. But in the scenario that it is a blowout, he'll be one of the first ones to get yanked out of there. It's just that blowout is tougher to see in this one, Davis. This projects to be a really fun game.
Yeah, I mean, freaking Campazzo and Rivers and Vlatko Kankar are going to be a rotation that the Nuggets have out there. I don't know if a blowout is that likely. You're right.
Yeah, and especially with Jokic playing. If Jokic wasn't playing, let's talk about a completely different thing. But Jokic is playing. It's a matchup against Minnesota, who have been awesome offensively. Awesome. It's just defensively, they can't do anything. And that shows on the Denver total. They have a 117 total here with Michael Porter and Jamal Murray out. So, obviously, Vegas is still liking Denver in this one. They're still 3-point favorites against Minnesota on the road. It's just that Minnesota's a lot of fun offensively. And so I think that this game could very well be competitive.
Yeah. So I guess that, that would have to leave some gaps in ownership for the Minnesota side, because if we think it's going to be a competitive game, I'm not anticipating the backcourt of Shaq Harrison and Facundo Campazzo to be playing incredible defense here. So Cat, Edwards, Dar, Vanderbilt. I think all of those guys look like decent. In the case of Anthony Edwards, Edwards looks like a fantastic tournament. Like we have him projected for 4% ownership. If you were running MME tonight, I think 15% Edwards would seem right.
Yeah, it's just such a good spot. It's such a good spot for Minnesota here, catching Denver really banged up again. Their rotation is looking bleaker and bleaker by as each game passes. No Michael Porter Jr. tonight. He's not great defensively, but he does have some size to him. And so, I think Edwards, as you mentioned, I do like him as a tournament play. Dar, I think, is still kind of accessible around the industry. Nearly 50% optimal percentage on FanDuel, and looks like a 7% ownership coming to him. That's attractive. Cat, less attractive because center and priced appropriately. But I would still do it. What we've seen from Minnesota, Davis, is they're not managing anybody. So if the
Yeah.
game is competitive, they'll play, 36 minutes. And we're starting to run out of teams that we can say that, right? So Minnesota's not that they're changing anything for the playoffs, but I mean, just watch them play. They've been really fun offense, and they've been really clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, I think we're good on that game. Our final game, a game that definitely matters to both teams, the Portland Trail Blazers playing at the Phoenix Suns. Obviously, Lillard, McCollum, Nurkic, that's it. You're not playing anyone else. I mean, literally no one else scores fantasy points for the Portland Trail Blazers. Like Covington plays like 42 minutes and gets like 8 DK points. Like it's just it is what it is. And then on the Suns side, I guess if Ayton were to not play, I mean, what did I guess Chimezie has to play a bunch of minutes because he's really the only. I mean, Dario Saric against Nurkic. I guess I'd like to watch that happen, but Chimezie would be a legit play.
I'm kind of in agreement in terms of it's gonna come down to who starts. But listen, between Chimezie and Saric, I mean, they're just not going to be able to do much against Nurkic, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, if we can get started minutes out of Chimezie or Saric at minimum prices, I think that's going to be really interesting. I mean, even the backup, if they just do like a 24-24 split at that point, even both of them are going to pop a little bit in our projection. So that is certainly something to keep an eye out, but that's not really going to impact Chris Paul and Devin Booker in terms of the rates at all. It's not that, it's not that Ayen's rates were that impressive anyway. His rebounding rate's always been pretty strong, but I don't foresee anything changing for Paul and Booker. It's just a matter of how you feel about them in this slate. 9-gamer. They're a part of pretty competitive positions, especially Paul. Booker is 7,500 on FanDuel. That I thought was pretty attractive. And Paul's is priced up a little bit. His rates have been pretty good. Minutes have been pretty good there, as the Suns obviously want to wrap this thing up and maybe get to the first seed. They haven't been playing great ball, though. They've lost 2 in a row, or 6-4 over their last 10. So they kind of have to get it together quickly here before the playoffs begin. And this matchup against Portland does profile as a good one. Should be a good game environment. 119 total for those guys, and they're catching Portland on the second night of a back-to-back, which I still think, Lillard and McCollum and Nurk, actually, as you mentioned, they're in play in this slate. I just wouldn't play multiple of those guys because of the slate size. That's all.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I guess what I would say is I would set the lineup. I would set the rule: if Booker and Paul, then min 1. Lillard, McCollum, Nurk is the way out, because then you'd be just betting on a crazy game environment over time. That's probably what I would do. Is I would work the correlation that way.
And Portland definitely has something to play for. By the way, I mean they're sitting in 5th place and can certainly stay there. It's just that their schedule's so tough, and listen, to their credit, they're pulling off these tough wins. They just won at Utah yesterday, I believe. So they're pulling them off. It's just they're going to have to keep going because the Lakers have a little bit of an easier schedule, and I believe so does Dallas. So they still have to go out there and play Lillard and McCollum and these guys heavy minutes.
Yeah. All right. I think that should be. I think that should be good. Any favorite play of the slate is who? Pacheco. Stone cold favorite Pacheco GPP play is who?
Oof. That is putting me on the spot. I would say I'm going to go with, and this is absolutely going to come back to haunt me, like 100%. I'm going to go with some of those Kings guys in this slate, just because I feel pretty confident on their minutes and what they've been doing with their rotation. And I think DeLon and Buddy, given their price tags, especially on DraftKings, are just going to get lost in this slate. So I do like them quite a bit in tournaments.
I was going to say Buddy. Is mine. I mean, he offers basically the same value prop as Anthony Edwards, which is like he goes off for 40 real life points. And people just don't like Buddy Hield. People don't ever give Buddy the respect. So that was going to be my guy, and then the other one was going to be Aaron Gordon, who I think Aaron Gordon is basically going to play point guard for the Nuggets tonight. The way they're like, I think he's going to handle the ball a ton for the Nuggets tonight. So I think he looks pretty solid. And my guess is he'll obviously be very chalk on FanDuel. My guess is he gets under-owned on DraftKings because so many people are going to play Millsap or JaMychal Green.
Yeah, and he's like, what, 5,100, I think, on DraftKings. And make no mistake about it, when Jokic is on the court, he will do the ball, like all of the ball handling. But when he's out of it, if Gordon can get those minutes, I think those might be really, really favorable minutes for him in terms of what you're talking about, ball handling and even some scoring, because they will certainly need it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. There we go, everyone. Thank you. I'm signing off for the rest of the 3 days left of the NBA season. You'll be in Pacheco and Andrew's capable hands tomorrow, and good luck.